Hey, this is Sharon and Juna. Welcome to Crazy Biatch Asians, the YouTube channel. The following audio was recorded for podcast purposes, so there are no visuals for this YouTube video.
Feel free to put down that phone, go for a walk, cook some food and listen to us chatter for the next little while.
If for some reason you don't want to listen on the YouTube platform, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now, on to the ep. Hey, welcome to Crazy Biatch Asians. This is a podcast where we discuss the issues Asians can face in the Western world with a critical mind, a bit of healthy debate, and lots of tea. Hosted by Sydney-based digital marketer Sharon Jiang and journalist Juna Zhu.
Hey. On today's episode, we're chatting all things ABG, aka the Asian baby girl. We're digging a little deeper than the general meme stereotype and looking at the meaning and etymology of this cultural phenomenon.
So Juna, as we both know, Sydney is now in our 6th week of lockdown. We do hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ready to get out of my trackies, dress up and go out.
Oh my goodness, those were the days. And as much as I complain about clubbing and just going out in general, I miss it. And seeing everyone overseas, especially, looking like actual human beings, dressed in proper clothes and having fun with their friends, both brings sadness, but also brings hope that there are good times ahead for us.
Totally. Let's just focus on the good times ahead because lockdown will be over sooner or later. So, in an effort to keep everyone's spirits up, we've got a fun episode today. One that might make you nostalgic for your clubbing days or get you excited for when we can finally go out. Today, we're talking about the cultural phenomenon that is the ABG, Asian baby girl.
Just a disclaimer that we're still currently recording via Zoom, so the sound may not be as crisp as usual.
Last week in our Inappropriate Questions and Statements Part 2 episode, we touched on the ABG, but we only scraped the surface of this cultural phenomenon.
Yes, so to reiterate our previous ep, according to Urban Dick, the top definition of an Asian baby girl is ABGs like to hang with gangsters and wear thin, slutty clothing. They normally have a ride or die homie, someone who is always down for them or die trying. ABGs are also known for dyeing their hair a lot from blonde to black. They have many piercings, multiple on the ears and stomach/lip. They probably have teased hair, bangs, and have had extensions at one point or another. Could also have painted nails and tattoos. ABGs are super hot, but you would probably get jumped if you tried to hit on them. I think to add to this very descriptive definition, they also love going to raves and post about it on Instagram. They have perfectly filled in eyebrows and the rose or dragon tattoo and, body piercings. What are some other stereotypical traits that you can think of, Shaz?
I feel like we've covered lots of them, but on the top of my head, I'm thinking drinking boba tea, a full face of makeup with false eyelashes being like the defining factor, drives a BMW, has balayage hair and really long acrylic nails. And if you're really extra, you've got like little rhinestones on your nails.
The Korean nail art.
Exactly, the Korean nail art.
So it's also seen as the complete opposite of the other ABG. So the other ABG is the Asian Bible girl, which according to several Facebook groups is a wholesome girl who loves Jesus and is probably a part of the rice movement. And no, not the actual rice that you eat, but I think if you know anything about rice and church, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's also this one trait of the Asian Bible girl that goes, Boba isn't an acronym for bubble tea, but for Asian Bible girls, it stands for Bible over boys, amen. Anyone want an episode on this ABG? But what's most interesting, though, is that the definition for your Asian baby girls on Urban Dictionary concludes with the statement, most Asian girls do not appreciate being called an ABG. However, then you see a lot of young women on popular Facebook groups like Subtle Asian Dating who proudly call themselves ABGs.
Absolutely. And it's funny how you mentioned the other ABG because I've never heard of the Asian Bible girl until now. But now that you've brought it up, it totally brings back memories of high school because I actually know a few Asian Bible girls. And when you said the rice movement, oh, that was totally a thing back in high school.
Rice, exactly. It's a
It's
thing.
like a repressed memory coming back to me. So, back to the Asian baby girls. So, before looking into this episode, my understanding and perception of ABGs was admittedly really shallow. I knew them as this memeable stereotype, this visual aesthetic that's very easy to spot from a mile away. But there's actually an interesting analysis behind the ABG, and it's quite culturally significant within the Asian American and now also the Asian Australian community.
Yes, we've talked about Asian fetish in many previous episodes, which really unpicked the lotus blossom stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. So, to quickly explain the lotus blossom stereotype, it's basically the submissive Asian woman stereotype. However, the ABG stereotype, which was born in the late 90s and early 2000s, is a direct contrast to the lotus blossom one.
According to the F Word magazine, quote, the ABG leads the counterculture against the decades long Orientalist stereotype of Asian American women as a submissive lotus blossom. So it basically subverts the idea that Asian women are quiet, shy, and reserved and paved the way for Asian women to be loud and brash and opinionated, which seems to be the general personality of ABGs you see today.
Exactly. So ABGs are social butterflies at heart. So, to quote the F Word magazine again, the writer says, personality wise, the ABG is usually incredibly sociable, projecting an easy confidence that stands in stark contrast with the acquiescent attitudes of previous stereotypes. So, they're basically party girls with a carefree attitude, and in a way, this also subverts the Western idea that all Asians are nerds with glasses and will do your maths homework. And speaking of which, this actually reminds me of a conversation we were having with one of our listeners. He raised the point that if you're an outgoing Asian, you're not a typical Asian in inverted commas, which plays into this idea that Asians are shy and reserved. Shout out to that listener who raised that interesting point. You will know who you are.
Yes, so the ABG stereotype somewhat rewrites the way Asian women can be perceived in the Western society. Not only that, I feel like it's a huge contrast to traditional Asian values of obeying your elders, not participating in risky or unacceptable behavior like you're drinking, drugs, tattoos, dyeing your hair, and dating within your own race, as many ABGs date non Asian men of color. So, this is not something we usually see in Australia as we don't have a large African community here. But apparently in the US, many ABGs date black men, which is a very touchy topic to many Asian parents. Not saying that this is a good mindset for parents to have, but it exists for the older generations. So, to many Asian parents, ABGs are super rebellious.
Yeah, I totally agree on that point because it's definitely a rebellion against the good, in inverted commas, straight A student stereotype that many Asian parents prefer. But what I find really ironic, and this is just my personal opinion and experience, while the visual look of the ABG goes against the straight A student look, ABGs aren't inherently dumb or stupid. Many of the ABGs that I know of and were mutual friends with are incredibly intelligent and still got really good grades and now have awesome careers. I think as time went on, an ABG could be two things at once. So going back to the F Word magazine, ABGs are the, quote, types of people to rave on the weekends, but also study extremely hard for their organic chemistry midterm the next day. And to me, that literally sums up the ABGs. I know they studied physics and economics and chemistry, but then they got blitzed on the weekend and went to raves and got crazy.
100%. Every single ABG I know, well, anyone who identifies as an ABG that I know, they're super intelligent, but then they like to party. And to think of it like this, it's quite a powerful statement for Asian women to be able to show others that they can be both smart and sexy.
Mm.
However, I think I need to stop there because, again, to refer back to the Urban Dictionary definition, some people don't see it as a compliment to be called an ABG, which I want to dabble on later in this episode.
Absolutely. Going to that point, we will definitely get onto the negative sides of ABGs. But I just wanted to say one more thing about this stereotype. And I think the really interesting thing about the ABG stereotype, and I think this can be a larger conversation about stereotypes in general, is that the ABG is a self imposed stereotype that the Asian community invented. How many times did I just say stereotype in that last sentence? So, unlike the lotus blossom one that was placed on Asian women by white men, or the nerdy stereotype typified in Hollywood, the ABG is a pure creation by Asians for Asians. So the F Word magazine agrees and says, quote, unlike its predecessors, the ABG is actually a self-imposed stereotype. Virtually no one outside of the Asian American community knows of the stereotype's existence. And I'm going to add Asian Australian in this mix because ABGs are definitely a thing here too. So, Juna, my question to you is a stereotype more appropriate and warranted if it's self imposed?
Oh, okay. I think this is a dangerously fine line. I
Mm.
completely understand the appeal for Asians who may want to fit into this stereotype. Even in Hollywood, you see Asians still being portrayed as being that unattractive nerd, the comic relief character, or a harmless friend. So this
Mm.
attitude rebels against that notion and acts as an antithesis. Hence, you see those dramatic lashes and long nails and so forth. But this is incredibly problematic since you then end up with an entire movement of girls looking like clones of each other's. ABGs are often seen as a group of people defined by their looks and not their individual personalities. So you kind of
Mm.
get lost amongst this sea of other people who look exactly the same as you and you lose touch of who you actually are. Now,
Mm.
another thing that needs to be raised is that the term gained popularity in the late 1990s to the early 2000s amongst Asian Americans. And according to an article on Culture As, during this period, Asian baby gangsters subverted the model minority stereotype, but in damaging and disavowed ways. So, quote, according to posters, the term was reductive more than radical, referencing terms like gangbangers, sex workers, and drug dealers. Somewhere along the line, however, a gender divide was erected and baby replaced ganger, possibly as a nod to the petite stature that many Asian women are said to have. It is a perception critics call the infantilization of Asian women. Now, I don't know about you, Shaz, but that doesn't seem like the most appropriate term anyone would want to associate with. And yet, in today's society, you have plenty of women who strive for this aesthetic, not really knowing what an ABG historically represents. So, what about you?
That is a really, really good point. And I feel like I could not have summed it up better myself because I think a lot of women nowadays adopt the ABG persona without really thinking about the cultural meaning behind it. And it's just like a fun aesthetic or a fun look to do. But I agree with you that it is a dangerously fine line. And the stereotype, whether self imposed or not, does have a negative side. So, Juna, why don't you take it away?